Welcome, everybody. My name is Douglas French. I am president of the League of Women Voters for Rye Brook and Port Chester, and former mayor of the City of Rye. And welcome to our candidate forum for the Board of Education of the City of Rye. I want to welcome our timekeeper, Roz Carvin. She will be keeping time for us. Our moderator, Alice Tenney, is a longtime resident of the town of Mamaroneck, very active in the school system, on the PTA, and various educational committees, and a longtime member of that league. I want to welcome our candidates. Thank you all for running. We win or lose, we appreciate your willingness to serve and still stay involved in the community either way. I want to welcome the audience. Thank you for your topics and questions. Very informative topics in the news, topics that we've all been reading in the newspaper and around town. So thank you for those. This forum will be replayed on our YouTube channel, probably within an hour or so after this forum. It'll be on our website. We'll give it to Rye City TV, and it will be on Facebook. So plenty of opportunity to see this forum. We have 8 candidates here tonight running for 3 seats. Election day is Tuesday, March 18th. Polls are open from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. at the Rye City Middle School Gymnasium. If we have technical issues, we're just going to plow through it. So if somebody gets frozen, we'll come back and circle back with them. But we don't expect too much of that tonight. So I think I've covered all of the important points. The league, the most important point. Like every other group, we've had to pivot to a virtual operation, and that does cost money. So please go to our website and donate. It does cost money to put these programs on virtually. But we're getting a lot more viewership and engagement. And those are our 2 goals. That's what you'll see tonight. Is our goal is to educate the public and engage the public on policy issues and people that impact our schools and government. And we're a group of nonpartisan volunteers that work very well together, right, Roz? And so we're doing a lot of good work. So please, if you can, donate at our website. So with that, I will turn it over to our moderator tonight, Alice Tenney. The forum is all yours.
Thank you. Good evening. This is my first time doing this, but I can say right off the bat, the election is May 18th, not March 18th. Caught Doug in a little mistake, but no, we don't do these things 10 months in advance. So with that, just for the audience to go over what the format of this evening will be, each candidate will have 90 seconds for an opening statement. Each one will have 60 seconds per answer. What will happen is we will then go to questions. We hope to get through to 6, but with so many candidates, we'd be happy if we got to all 5 questions. The order of answers has already been predetermined by Doug, who picked names out of a hat. So we're going to start with 1, move through 8. When we get to the first question, it will be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, and follow through. So almost everybody 2 people will not get a chance to go first, but that's because there are 8 candidates. After we're done, each candidate will have 90 seconds for a closing statement, and we'll work backwards in that order. So number 8 will go first. There will be a period for possible rebuttals. The rebuttals will be 30 seconds, but they're only allowed if the candidate has detected an actual mistake.
I will not hear actually what you have to say because I haven't heard it yet.
We all need to mute.
They're doing that, and they're doing questions. They get a minute to respond and rebuttals.
Laura, you're logged in twice. You've got 2 people logged in as Laura, and we can hear the other one.
Sorry about that. So rebuttals only in the case of someone stating a factual error, or if someone feels that his or her position was wrongly characterized by another candidate. Our timekeeper will hold up a sign, a 30-second warning sign when you have 30 seconds left. And then there will be a stop sign. If you're in the middle of a sentence, you can finish your sentence, but let's please leave it at that. So we will start with opening statements, and our first candidate is John Leonard.
First, I'd like to give a big thank you, and I'm sure on everyone's behalf, to the LWP for hosting tonight's forum. For those that don't know me, I'm John Leonard. I've been a Rye homeowner since 1978, was a Midland parent in 1992 and 93, and returned to Rye from living in London in 2012. My financial services career spanned 42 years, with equity analysis and corporate governance in the forefront. Why am I running? In a nutshell, to put public back into the governance of the public schools in Rye. What does this mean? First, full disclosure to and consultation with the broad community before taking action. Second, a board that vigorously debates key issues and where public unanimity among board members is the exception rather than the rule. The City Council is a great example here. Third, I'd look for a broad, transparent analysis of bias, discrimination, and bullying against all targets. Race is certainly one of them, but by no means the only one. Finally, it might seem superfluous with a booming stock market and a surging economy, but better financial disclosure and ongoing financial discipline are needed to ensure that the public both understands the schools and continues to support them. I'm looking for your questions, and thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Callie Erickson.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this event. I am Callie Erickson, and I am running to be reelected to the Board of Education. My husband and I have lived in Rye with our 3 children for 10 years. We have a daughter in 8th grade at Rye Middle School, and our younger son and daughter attend Osborne Elementary School. By way of a brief introduction, I've served on the board for the past 3 years, during which time I have been a member of the Audit, the Policy, the Technology, and the Curriculum Council committees. Currently, I also serve as chairperson for the Audit Committee. In addition, I have held several finance-related volunteer positions in the Rye community. These include a member of the City of the Rye Finance Advisory Committee, treasurer of the Osborne Executive Committee, chairperson of the Rye Presbyterian Nursery School Board, and treasurer of the Rye Free Reading Room Auxiliary Board. Prior to moving to Rye, I worked in strategic development and M&A at JP Morgan and 2 entertainment companies. I believe this is a critical time in our school district and community. We need to focus on maintaining our rigorous academic standards while addressing current and pressing needs that include assessing and addressing COVID learning gaps and social and emotional needs of students and faculty, creating and supporting an inclusive school system that meets the needs of all of our learners, and ensuring the capital bond project is carried out in a fiscally responsible and timely manner. In summary, I believe I'm the best candidate to help support the district in continuing to make the Rye schools the best they can be. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll hear from Laura Labriola.
Laura, you're muted.
Okay, sorry. Okay, start again. My name is Laura Labriola, and I've lived in Rye for 26 years. I have 2 children and a stepdaughter who've all been through Rye High since kindergarten. I have a high school senior, and my son is a 7th grade special education student. And many of you may know me through that capacity, through my work with RAISE, Rye All Inclusive Special Ed. I was one of its founders and its co-president for 2 years. Through my advocacy efforts, I've collaborated with the past 4 superintendents and 4 special ed directors. And because I like to approach these issues analytically, I have actually read Americans with Disability Act, the federal IDEA, and the New York State 200.6 from cover to cover. One of the other things that drove me towards running for the Board of Ed seat was during the Board of Ed interest meeting, they were asked what skill set they were looking for in a new board member. And they said they were looking for someone with construction experience because of all the upcoming capital projects. So with my 20+ years of commercial construction management and budgeting, I felt like it was fitting for me to run for a board seat. I'd also like to highlight that with the mental health initiatives and our partnership with Effective School Solutions, I can offer some insight to that as well. I have a farm where we offer equine mental health therapy. So while I am not a mental health professional myself, I do have experience putting together a mental health program.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll hear from Kelsey Johnson.
Thank you, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for creating this forum and to all the participants listening. My name is Kelsey Johnson, and I'm a parent of 4 children who attend the Rye City School District, which makes me heavily invested in its continued excellence. My professional financial background and my community service commitment have uniquely qualified me to apply a solution-oriented approach to the existing board. My 4 children range in ages from preschool up to 5th grade and will be in the Rye City School District for the next 14 years. I've continuously volunteered at the school level, and I've worked with our PTO as a class parent. I've worked as a chair for many school activities. I've worked with the administration as a volunteer on the Race, Inclusivity, and Community Task Force. And I've worked with our board as I've consistently attended meetings over the past few years to engage on issues such as a transition to full day kindergarten and annual budget process. From a skills qualification standpoint, I've earned a Bachelor of Arts in Mathematics. I earned my CFA charter, and I have over 10 years of experience as a buy-side equity analyst. I believe this finance and analysis-oriented work experience are going to help me adapt to the financial challenges of the board and help them think through the annual budgeting. Finally, my community service has prepared me for this role. As a co-chair of the Rye Traffic and Pedestrian Safety Committee, I collaborate with Rye residents, Rye police, Rye elected officials, and Rye city staff. Our work is complicated and it moves very slowly due to the many layers of communication required to progress. But as a member of the school board, I'm going to apply this solutions-oriented approach and advocate for the success of every student. Thank you.
Next is Chris Repetto.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining. Chris Repetto. I've been on the board for 9 years. So if you're the kind of people who can get involved in these sort of things, you've probably already heard me talk a lot. I'll say a couple things about board service, and I'll make the comment that when you get an election with this many people involved, it's usually because there's a hot topic du jour, and people want to fix something that's on the table. I'm going to tell you, board service is not about the topic du jour. The things we work on are years and sometimes decades. We're in the middle of a decades-long approach to student-based learning, project-based learning. Evolving public education from what it was 100 years ago to where it can be. An example, our literacy program, years in the design and years in the rollout. Singapore Math, we just added, there was years of work going into that, and there'll be a couple of years of work rolling that thing out. The capital project we're in the middle of now. Before the idea of the bond came out, there was 5 years of lots of hard work of looking at where we are and where we're going before that stuff happens. What happens in the board takes years. I'll say this about the current environment. There are no outside forces that are coming in to tear down publication or change what we do. It's ours. We own it, we run it, we manage it. Thanks for being here.
Okay, Megan Evans up next.
Hi, my name is Megan Evans. I've lived in Rye for 11 years and have 2 children, Claire, who is in kindergarten at Milton, and Jack, who is at Christ Church. I just wanted to start by saying that I have tremendous respect for the school board members as well as the school leadership. I realize this is not an easy task, and I appreciate everything you've done for the school community, particularly this year. I want to make it very clear that I understand that board members are there to provide support and oversight. That said, I believe my work in schools over the past 15 years, as well as my work in equity and inclusion, could be an asset to the board. I've worked as a teacher as well as an administrator, and have done significant work on my school's strategic planning initiatives. Personally, I believe I am well suited to the position because I know how to listen, ask the right questions, view multiple perspectives, and problem solve. Finally, I firmly believe that it is essential for a board member to come in with an open mind and without a set agenda. They must be willing to listen respectfully to each other and the community, even if they disagree. Thoughtful, open discourse and critical thinking are necessary for effective learning and problem solving. This, after all, is what we want to model for Rye students. Thank you for your time.
Okay, now we'll hear from John Moschetti.
Sorry, I had to unmute. Hello, I'm John Moschetti. I'd like to thank the Women's League for the opportunity to speak to the public. I'm requesting your support for my candidacy for the Board of Education in Rye. I have been a teacher, dean of students, and administrator for approximately 28 years in New York City public school system. I supervised every position at the high school level in New York City, and I believe I'd be a great asset to the Rye Board of Education. With my experience and expertise in the roles of social studies teacher, assistant principal of pupil personnel, which is guidance, special education, assistant principal of operations, and the BRT building response leader who deals with discipline. I have a keen understanding of the systems and procedures in every facet of the high school administration. I've observed all core subjects and most interdisciplinary ones at the high school level. I'd be able to provide outside solutions and be a resource for the board members and district leaders as well. I'm currently on the executive board on the on the Council of School Supervisors and Administrators and represent assistant principals citywide in New York City. I'm one of 3 people that do that in New York City. I have held other policymaking positions such as school leadership team, where I was elected by an overwhelming number of teachers. I've represented the Council of Supervisors and Administrators in C30 hearings where we've led to the hiring of principals and assistant principals. I've also held the position of schools local Office of Equal Opportunity Coordinator as a designee of New York City's Office of Equal Opportunity to ensure a hostile-free work experience. Other local organizations I'm a member of is the American Legion, the Emerald Society, and the Italian American Caucus. My most treasured role is a father. My daughter is currently enrolled in Rye.
We've reached the deadline. Okay,
Thank you.
am I back on?
Yes, you are.
Okay, I apologize. When the cell phone rings, it kind of messes everything up. We'll now hear from Bozidar Jovanovic.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Bozidar Jovanovic, and I thank the League of Women Voters for allowing this debate. I lived in Rye since 2004. I have 6 children. One is the graduate of 2013. One is in high school, one in middle school, 2 in Osborne, and 1 is a babe. So clearly I have a large stake in the Rye public education. But more than that, I actually have a family tradition of education with educators throughout the several generations. As a matter of fact, I have a PhD in physics, and I taught my way through graduate school. And even though I pursued career investment management with a CFA and all, I've been drawn back to education. So I taught for a year in Bard High School in the city. And from 2009 to 2017, I was an adjunct professor of finance at Manhattan College, where I guided over 20 students to their master's thesis. And I never asked who they are and where they come from, but I asked for hard work, poise, and determination, and they did succeed. I write for the board because I have 5 topics that I really hold dear and I think that need to be changed. Transparency, which is essential to public trust. We have seen 2 days ago the board refused to answer questions. Independence and accountability. Board is not rubber stamp; it's accountable to the people in Rye. Inclusion, true inclusion, is that something that we as citizens Rye we to come together and not allow radical ideologies to provide stereotyping, scapegoating. Parental control and education, not indoctrination. Thank you.
Okay, we're now going to move forward into our questions. As Chris Cuomo would say, let's get at it. So our first question is on the topic of what else but the pandemic. How would you propose the administration deal with the educational and learning gaps that have resulted from the pandemic? And by the way, because there are 8 candidates, if anyone needs the question reread, please feel free to ask. We'll start with Ms. Erickson.
Okay, thank you. So that's a great question. We actually had a board meeting where we discussed this topic on April 20th. Our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, Sherry Goffman, laid out a presentation where she described what the district is going to do to assess what COVID learning gaps have happened in the last year, and how we're going to address those and move forward. And just to summarize what she talked about in the elementary school, they were going to look at benchmarks in reading and writing and math, and then come up with specific plans for grade learning gaps, and then also for students, and where they could, in their win period, work on certain areas. And then in middle school and high school, they would get extra help in math lab or in tutoring. And then there's also going to be summer programming where students will be able to catch up on certain areas. And then there's also a fall learning plan that will be put into place. So it's a very
Thank you. That's time is up. We'll move on now to Ms. Johnson.
Thank you. I think Callie did a great job of summarizing a lot of the additional supports that the school is going to put in place over the summer and after school. I was able to hear the COVID recovery plan that was proposed by Sherry Goffman. And again, I'm just continually impressed by the thought that is put in by our administration to support our students. One thing that I thought the board did a good job of questioning is the importance of not only looking at those students who might be at a failing level, but also having some sort of analysis for the students who used to be at a top tier and sort of drop lower. So maybe they're in a mid tier. So these are the students that also, have been impacted by this pandemic, and they're going to need support as well. So how do we have a multi-layered data approach to understand which children need our support? And the other piece of it is the social emotional learning, which the district has committed to. They've hired ESS to help with that component, and that's only going to help our children thrive. It's been a difficult year for everybody, and getting them back on an academic track also has the social emotional learning piece, which the board has acknowledged. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Repetto.
Alice, I think you skipped Laura.
Yeah, I think Laura goes next.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you for correcting me. I thought I did. I apologize. Ms. Labriola?
Yeah, it's hard to follow both Callie and Kelsey, because I think our district is actually doing a good job at addressing this regression. We do have a plan in place for looking at regression, assessing it, and putting a plan in place, like they both mentioned, summer programs and additional benchmarking so that we can understand where they lie. I do think there was particular regression with special education students. I think some of them are not as versed in online learning. It's a little more difficult for special education students. So, but I do know that our Director of Special Education, Erin Friedenberg, is doing a great job and looking at benchmarks and assessment for special education students as well. So, and again, also to mention the mental health, I mean, I think that's a component that I believe in. I ask my kids every day, who did you sit with at lunch? That's more important to me than how well they did on their tests, because I believe social emotional drives the rest of the education.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Labriola, if you want to turn your video back on, that would be helpful. At least on my screen, you're gone.
I can see her.
Hey, I apologize for the misordering.
No worries.
But we are now on Mr. Repetto.
Yeah, the question isn't what should we do, it's what are we doing? What's already there. And in an interesting way, it's what we do every year. Kids are assessed throughout the year against curricula where they are. There's multiple levels of assessment It takes a couple of years on the board to figure all that out. And the beginning of every year, the end of every year, the beginning of every year, we look at where kids are and we try to figure that out. So in a lot of ways, what we need to do is exactly what we're designed to do in a normal year. Obviously, a little more challenges. I think the big addition is the social emotional learning. The amount of supports that the administration is bringing in are tremendous. So we've been focusing more and more on social emotional learning anyway. The pandemic has accelerated that, and I think that'll be the biggest piece. But yeah, there's a great plan in place, and our teachers are fantastic at doing this stuff. So I feel pretty good about where we're headed.
Thank you. Now hear from Ms. Evans.
Thank you. I agree with a lot of what's been said in terms of assessments and benchmarks, both academically speaking, but also social emotionally. I know that Rye has developed a clear plan of action to combat the pandemic-related learning loss. I think it's important that we focus on accelerating the discovery, responding to crisis with like new tools, so new kinds of learning to help students catch up. And then also, of course, as it's been said, making sure that the most high need students don't get left behind in all this. Also, just globally, I think this is an opportunity for us to really look at and seize on reducing education inequality, and making sure, again, that we're meeting the educational needs of students with disabilities, breaking down barriers where there are barriers to high quality education, and then just making sure our teachers are really supported and prepared with an expanded toolkit.
Thank you. Mr. Moschetti.
Sure. So in education, to answer your question, we start with a baseline in curriculum. So you give that baseline test, and then you determine where the chips fall, where the kids are. And with that, that then drives the instruction. The instruction is usually individually based. I think everyone on the council, most people that spoke really nailed it on the head. Sounds like the administration's on top of it. And this is kind of what I've done for years on an administrative level. We look at these data sets, we compare them, and we look at how where instruction needs to go based on the curriculum map. And it's very important, like I think Ms. Colley said, to look at students where they are and how many, where they dropped. Because you have kids right now, I see it in my school, they're falling off, and you have some kids that were not good students, they're actually doing well in this environment. So it's—
Thank you very much. Mr. Jovanovic.
So it's clearly that the lockdown has had a very detrimental effect on all students, but I would say it probably hit the worst those who are in grade school as well as disability students. Because it's very nice to be online for a high schooler or maybe middle schooler, but to keep a 6-year-old on online learning is kind of difficult. So I suspect that the biggest gaps are going to be there in the elementary level, and certainly need to rely on the data that we have in school to see where we are. And I definitely support that the fact that we have to provide either summer or some other instructional support, probably the experience after school. But the biggest issue is going to be the elementary grades, where the gap, I believe, is going to be the worst, as well as the disability students who cannot benefit the same way when they are in business. And of course, the fact that kids are getting isolated is a difficult issue as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Leonard.
Oh, thank you. I think I would agree that the schools have identified that there are issues and developed a plan that seems to make sense. I think there are a couple of things that could be done to speed the process up. One would be to apply more pressure to have everyone in class, that the remote option is still probably too available. A good student who can learn remotely is also going to teach his colleagues when he's in the class. That's not been done. Rye was not among the leaders in opening its schools back up physically. It probably should have been. Second point I'd like to address is what the teachers union is willing to put into this. They're certainly key to getting this fixed. I've heard some discussion that suggests they may have been part of the problem by being a little reluctant to allow the move online. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next question has to do with student needs.
I'd like to rebuttal.
Yeah, Chris is entitled to a shot here.
Yeah, are we doing the 30-second rebuttal?
Yes, although point of order, Doug, is that now?
Yes, if it's to a statement that was made, to rebut a statement, yes, absolutely.
Yes, please go ahead.
We were the first district in Westchester County to open, and have been far ahead of most others. So I'm thoroughly proud of our teachers and our administration for how well and how aggressively they pushed on the state and pushed on the health department to catch up to the CDC and to catch up the American Pediatrics Association so we could get our kids back in the classroom as fast as possible. Our teachers were scared, as was understandable, but they worked with us. They worked really hard with us, and we got them back in as quickly as we could.
I have a rebuttal on that as well. My point to that is a lot of these guidelines are CDC based. So this is beyond the control of school administration. They have they are given guidelines. Right now, the guidelines, I believe, are 4 students. Once 4 students have COVID, the school closes down. The administration cannot do anything about that. So I'm having issues right now. I'm working still remotely. My school hasn't been able to open. Every time it opens, it closes because we have so many kids that are getting COVID. Now, Rye has been very aggressive in getting kids back.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And if I may,
one more.
thank you. Just follow on that point. I actually do have a different view than Mr. Leonard on the ability of our school district to play offense. And my example for that is, we have been hampered by these state restrictions, but I don't know of any other districts that worked as hard as ours to get the COVID surveillance testing set up for our community in case we were designated as a cluster zone to evaluate our students. Laura, I think your background is still making noise, the second one. In a way, if we were designated as a cluster zone, that we would actually have the in-house testing and capability to prove to the state that the inter-school spread was low enough to keep the doors open. So I've been very proud of the forward thinking of the administration on this topic.
Okay. I think we're ready to move on to the question number 2 on student needs. How would you improve the way Rye approaches areas such as special education, emotional well-being, and/or drug and alcohol prevention? And we will start with Ms. Labriola.
Okay, I think I'm the perfect person to answer this question. Special needs is definitely an area that's near and dear to my heart, and our school district has been working pretty hard on providing inclusion and with the special education students. I do think we are light years behind many of our peer districts, so there is work to be done there. But I definitely feel that the special education students can use a little bit of we have a co-taught classroom where we've had and we are looking forward in our budget to adding additional co-taught classrooms in the high school. So I look forward to those new developments in that area.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson.
Thank you. I have seen the district. I know we are a school of excellence, and there's always a way to improve. And the district seems to take that very seriously. So for example, as Laura mentioned with the special needs students, they did put together a task force a couple years ago to work on some recommendations and have been slowly rolling that out with new hires and commitment to that space. On the other point of substance abuse, I think, it's a testament to the number of people right now discussing being on the school board. The volunteerism in our community is exceptional. And I personally am very grateful for Rye Act, who stepped in I guess it was probably 2016. I remember going to their first town hall when we had a very tragic error in our community, and they have worked tirelessly, a group of volunteers, to help support the school district in that regard. So we as a community are extraordinarily lucky to have so many well-educated and passionate people helping lift our students up from all angles.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Repetto.
I think in my opening statement, I mentioned multi-year initiatives, and all this touches. Special education is, one of the things we spend a huge amount of time thinking about. It's always a challenge. Rye is not such a big district that we can do everything in-house. We have, when we hired Dr. Byrne, we asked him to make it a priority to rethink how we approach special education as the district had grown. And there's always a balance between trying to provide the exact right programming for the cohorts you have and what's coming. So it's always an ongoing struggle, but it's something that's being focused on. We've got new administration, we've got new support in those areas. So it's been an area of focus for years. Social emotional learning is the same thing. We took a look across the district a couple of years ago and started this process, and you see it rolling out. Same thing with drug and alcohol. We started working with Rye Act, I think 2 or 3 years ago, and keeping the conversations going, focusing on our kids, focusing on what's going on inside the district, and focusing on our community and having those conversations and keeping things moving forward. So that's the best we can do.
Thank you. Ms. Evans.
Yeah, I agree that Rye has been working really hard to provide a better education for our special needs students. I think more can continue to be done. As Chris mentioned, it's a multi-year plan. I personally would like to see us onboard more special education teachers in-house. Like Laura, I'm a big advocate for co-taught classrooms. And then in terms of emotional learning, I think we are doing a good job. I think at times it can be a little more reactive than proactive. I've been trained at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, and there's a program called Ruler, which is much more of a proactive program that I'd love to see in schools like Rye Public Schools. And in terms of Rye Act, again, I think that they are making a lot of progress with drug and alcohol, but I'd like to see that continue. And I completely understand it's a long process that has to be tailored to our kids.
Thank you. Mr. Muschetti.
Yes, so I actually wrote the curriculum for the wellness program in a school in 2017. I had a 100% drop in suspensions and a 60% drop in behavioral incidents at the classroom level. And part of this was just to intervene, because a lot of this stuff is overlooked, and 2 was to use the best practices manual that we have in New York City. And it had to do with social emotional learning and metacognition, which is social learning how you think. I too read the IDEA law. I would recommend the standard operating procedure manual. It's much more useful if you're looking into special ed and special ed needs. I'm happy with the budget. I definitely approve it. I looked at the budget, it was bare bones. And most of the hirees were for students with accommodations, which are mandates. Those are necessary by law. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Mr. Jovanovich.
So in the course of this campaign, I actually met with several of the parents who have children with disabilities, because that was a new area for me. One of my children does have an IEP, but it's a very simple matter. And from them, I understand that we are still not doing a good job for that. So I guess we're making progress, but I understand there are also many outstanding litigations. And I think we should definitely come together and focus on this area, because certainly we can solve these issues better than through the courts, by including teachers when we can inside the school, or doing better for this population. As far as drug and alcohol is concerned, obviously, number one thing I think here is parents and the home situation. And it's very good that the school provides a support for that, but the essence is parental guidance and parental involvement.
Thank you. Ms. Erickson.
It
Hi,
was,
is it
John
supposed
Leonard next.
on Leonard though, I think first?
I think it's John Leonard, yeah.
Okay, thank
Oh.
you, Callie.
I apologize again.
I think I would agree completely that special ed is a area that is A, mandated, B, important, and C, to get it right is going to cost a lot of money. This is an area where I think the nature of special ed, that every special ed child by definition is going to be different. It's a great area for cooperation with other districts. I know we send some people out to other districts that have a special skill, and we take a few in where we've got it. But I think this is an area that we are spending too much on stipulations and settlement. The more of that can be put into education, the better. On the drug and alcohol front, no complaints. The one issue I would raise is that if medical marijuana is, or non-medical marijuana is coming to Westchester and Rye, we need to be prepared for it.
Thank you. And at least I'm an equal opportunity skip over with who I've skipped over, but now Ms. Erickson, thank you.
So as many people have said, the district is very committed to special education and mental health. I'll just point out that the budget that's we'll be voting on in 2 weeks, it's very fiscally responsible, but it also adds necessary programming and supports, and a lot of them are geared towards special ed. For example, it adds special education teachers for the co-teaching integrated classes. It replaces contractual special educating staff with full-time employees that give our students more flexibility and more consistent services. It also adds for an extension of American Sign Language, which is proven beneficial to students who struggle with verbal and written foreign language instruction. And then also the Haskins Lab, which supports children with language-based learning needs. So I think it's important to note that that is a significant part of the budget this year. It shows the district's commitment.
Thank you. We'll move now on to.
Could I just rebut one thing?
Yeah.
John, you made a comment about the amount of money going into legal settlements being too much. And I really wish that special ed settlements was something we could talk about. Unfortunately, it involves individual students, so we can never talk about that in public. I will make the comment that in general, when you see settlements, my experience over 9 years is that those are cost savings to the district, given other possibilities. Can't really get into more detail, but it's a really interesting quirk of how special ed works in New York State.
It's like aromatic with those flowers out there, right? Did you notice it when you were sitting out there?
No.
Somebody.
Laura, your other one's back off mute, Laura.
Yeah, I just want to, yes, Laura, you have a second device on?
I have no idea who that is, so maybe you can just cancel them out. I'm sorry.
I don't know if there's, let me see. Doug, is there a way, since you opened the call, maybe you can mute that?
You can
Yeah, I'll take a
exclude
look.
people if from the call, if you want to, if you are the organizer.
Yeah,
No, yeah, understood. I'll try to find where
Okay.
that is.
thank you.
Okay. We'll move on to finances. What would be your personal recommendations to improve the district's financial position? And we will start with Ms. Johnson.
Thank you.
You're on mute
You're
now, Chelsea. You went back on mute. It kicked off.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. What I've seen through my active participation in board meetings over the tenure of my living in Rye is the painstaking detail that the administration puts into creating the budget and the board puts into reviewing the budget. This is a cost compliant constrained budget because of the New York State tax cap. When we compare ourselves to schools of excellence in Westchester, like Bronxville and Chappaqua and Scarsdale, our cost per pupil is the lowest. So we are a fiscally conservative community who tries our best to do everything we've talked about on this call, which is support special education students, increase social emotional learning. We obviously 2 years ago had to go to the community for an infrastructure bond because the operating budget at that time, we were not able to journal over money to save for future, capital costs. But now we also in that bond have that ability to, support the ongoing needs of our school system. So I have confidence in the board's process
Thank
and we'll
you,
continue it.
Johnson.
Thank you.
Mr. Repetto.
Yeah, we got to keep doing what we're doing. We spend, we think about fiscal issues every year. Our administration, great shout out to Gabby O'Connor, who's our superintendent for business. She is a bear on costs and always focused on it. I'll echo what Kelsey already said. We have one of the best fiscal positions in any of our peer districts, arguably the best on any way you look at it. And we got to keep that going. We've got to be brutally efficient in how we manage this capital campaign and the capital plan. And we've just the way we went into it and think about what the whole capital plan is, which is spending money wisely now, so we don't have to spend it in the future at higher costs. So I love the way we approach things. Where our metrics are fantastic, and we're doing the best we can.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Evans.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with some of what's been said, or most of what's been said. I think we are aware that so much of the annual budget is dedicated to the salaries and benefits of our faculty, which of course, as an administrator and teacher, I'm in support of. And I think just continuing to manage the other parts of the budget as responsibly as we can, especially in terms of the bond, continuing to identify any areas where we could, either cut costs or just be mindful that costs of materials have skyrocketed during COVID. And
Thank you very much, Ms. Evans. Sorry. Mr. Muschetti.
Yeah, so budgeting, I'm pretty happy with the budget. Like I said, I think it was bare bones. Those disability costs, I do want to say the IDEA law is federal. And when you don't abide by those accommodations, you go to federal court and it costs lots of money. So some of those settlements, I would agree with Mr. Repetto, they definitely probably saved the school money for sure. And it's good to see that the board is acting on it and providing those disability accommodations. Other than that, I would like others to be creative with the budget in terms of keeping teacher costs down and things like that, where you have weeks in schools where teachers come in and it's just because it's mandated and they sit there at the end of the year and there's almost nothing to do. There's certain days where you have after the Regents exam, after everything's graded, depending on the snow days or what. I mean, so I would like people to be creative. If there's 1 or 2 days where we're basically giving teachers detention, that might be a bargaining chip in a contract agreement. The other thing is contracts that need to get enforced that maybe people don't even know exist, that things are covered for us, like phone, and all sorts of costs that I've dealt with as an APO.
Thank you. I apologize. I thought I was unmuted.
I'm sorry, can I just break in for 1 second? Ms. Evans, it may have been my fault. I believe I put up the 30-second sign and she was stopped.
Yeah, she lost 30 seconds.
So she lost 30 seconds in her last answer.
If we want to go and
just do it again.
Would you like to finish?
Give her the whole time.
Thank you for acknowledging. Thank you.
Okay.
I was like, wow, that was quick.
I tried to say, I yelled it out.
No, it's all good.
Apologize. Mr. Jovanovic.
So it's very good, and I appreciate the fact that we have good cost management in terms of in comparison with other districts. That is imperative in this environment. Now that we have a bond out, obviously the construction projects will have to be managed, and I think the cost saving should be there, looking into efficiently executing those projects and making sure that the construction companies we hire actually don't do a shoddy work, because that is where the future costs are. So that would be I think the number one thing, and also making sure that of course we have to provide for the special education and such, but we should probably check out the administrative position growth as opposed to teachers and see if every one of those administrative positions is actually needed. So that's basically where I would go.
Thank you. Mr. Leonard.
Thank you. A couple of points I'd like to make. First of all, I think we probably do need to look hard at the teacher complement given the declining enrollment in the district. Quick example, in 2016, you had 1,600 elementary students. You had 79 teachers. Next year, you're projected to have 1,275 and you have 76 teachers. Even if I assume 18 per class, that would reduce me to 70 teachers. That's six teachers right there. That's $750,000 that may be on the table. Second point, you did refinance the bonds. It was a nice, clean deal. Kudos to the board for doing that right. That's $100,000 a year that ideally should come back to the taxpayer. And third point is Chappaqua, Scarsdale operate below their tax cap. Why is Rye in such need of operating at it? Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Erickson.
Well, as many people have said, the districts, we've always been fiscally responsible and in a strong financial position. As many people have said, the Rye School District has the highest Moody rating that allows us to borrow at lower rates. The district looks to refinance to lock in these lower rates. For example, we just refinanced the 2013 bond, the Science Wing bond, where we locked in a savings, or we will lock in a savings of $1 million. And in terms of the annual budget, the district should continue to aggressively manage the other 20% of the budget that's not dedicated to salaries and benefits. Infrastructure upgrades funded by the capital bond project will help achieve operating cost savings in both the near and the long term. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Labriola.
Yeah, I mean, just to follow on what everyone says, I know with the 2% tax cap, I do believe that our district has been operating in a fiscally responsible manner. There are things that are unfunded mandates like special education and pension, teachers' pension funds and so forth, that the rising costs are actually more than 2% a year. So I do think they're doing a great job in balancing that. And again, in terms of the bond construction, there is definitely the need to manage that closely. Like I think Ms. Evans said, with the rising costs of construction because of COVID, you know, that was something that wasn't anticipated. So it's just something that needs to be looked at closely. And in any ways that we can find cost savings there, I think we need to manage that responsibly going forward.
Okay. Thank you. We'll move on now to the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion. How can the district improve in diversity, equity, and inclusion? And your thoughts, for example, on the district's approach in areas such as critical race theory and/or LGBTQ inclusion. And we will start with Mr. Repetto.
Hey, if you've been paying attention, what I've been saying all along is that we need to focus on our kids. The topic at hand is one of lots and lots of noise. There's lots of scary things going on out there. We're seeing, you know, school districts rushing into bad decisions because they're not engaging the community. They're not taking the time to think about where they are, where they're going, and then how to get there. So if you've been listening to our board meetings, what you've been hearing me say over and over again is that this is Rye. This is not any other place. This is not Manhattan. This is not the New York City public school system. We need to focus on our kids, our community, and figure out what's happening. Keep talking. Look at where we are. Talk about where we want to be, and then talk about whatever changes we may want to make. It's a long, slow, hard process. We need to listen to everybody, and we need to be very deliberate about this. But that's the absolute key to getting this right. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Evans.
Sure. I think that you know, it was important for us to hear at the past board meeting that our district isn't accepting anything blindly, and that it's very clear that they're taking the time to look for ideas and practices that will work for Rye and eliminating those that won't. I understand that a lot of the pushback comes from fear, you know, fear that we'll introduce these wildly inappropriate materials to young children. And the school board has committed to taking the time to get this right. You know, we won't be introducing chapter books before the kids learn phonics. We won't be telling kindergarten students that they are oppressors. Like, it became clear to me that they are going to get this right. And all that being said, the stories on Instagram were awful. This is a topic that's very important to me and the work that I do at my school. And everyone should feel disturbed by them and want to do right by our kids. We want everyone to feel a sense of belonging.
Alice, I do not see John anymore. So when you get, I don't see him on the screen. I'll try to contact him.
You're muted.
Alice, you're muted.
Oh, I apologize. We'll move on to Mr. Jovanovic.
All right, so on this topic, I disagree with what was said. First of all, it's very important to take this right and to make sure that the Rye is an accepting, inclusive community. But what has been done so far is absolutely not right. We have created a task force that doesn't represent the city. It represents the school district maybe, but not the city. And then we have introduced the task force guidance from Steinhardt Center, which is known for a radical ideology that is not acceptable to many people, and something that should not be done in public schools. Chris, you're right. There are things going around the country. The school districts are being sued over this, and I would prefer that this doesn't happen to us. For that reason, this has to be right, and which means the task force has to be reformed and actually represent the parents and citizens of Rye and not the school district. And then we have to come together and do it without interference by outside radical ideology. That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Leonard. Oh, Mr. Moschetti seems to be back.
Great.
Could you repeat the question? I'm sorry, I got knocked off.
Of course, it's on the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion. How can the district improve in DEI? And your thoughts, for example, on the district's approach in areas such as critical race theory and/or LGBTQ inclusion.
Well, what I'd like to say, the middle school definitely had a plan where they had counseling and they had group sessions. I'd like to see that come back. I know this was started by the grassroots movement, by the students. And the students had brought this to the attention that they wanted more inclusivity. And it's now kind of morphed into the community. There's now 60 people that made 50 questions within the last year. When I was at the Board of Ed meeting, you know, when people criticized the efforts or the lack, the questions, they were given kind of moral lessons, and people got on and said some things. But the fact is they're changing the questions June 15th. So I think it needs to go back to the students. That's what I would like to see. I'd like to see it get out of the political arena, go back to the students. Anyone in finance knows the kids do pick the better stock sometimes.
Thank you. Mr. Leonard.
Thanks. First suggestion would be that if the district does not already have the equivalent of a corporate employee hotline to confidentially receive complaints of discrimination, whether bias, and whether by school authorities or by one school authority against another, or I'd encourage one. Second, I think the purpose should be to study constantly biases of all types. The very racial focus of the Metro Center and the frankly equally racial focus of the proposed panorama survey are simply wrong in the Rye context. I would also suggest that we get full community participation. Community engagement is all of the City of Rye. It is not the district and its staff only. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Erickson.
Okay, thank you. So as we've talked about before, as part of the Rye commitment, it's our job to make sure that all children are receiving an education in an equitable, inclusive environment. And, last year when the board received many emails and letters from students and alumni and parents expressing concerning incidents that had happened to them at school and the community, it was the board's decision to look into that in more detail. And that's when the task force was formed last summer. And as Chris said, this is in a very early stage, information gathering stage. It's a very slow and deliberate process. There are people that don't agree with it, but you have to start somewhere, and we've started, and we are on a path where the next board meeting, there'll be recommendations, and we will discuss that in a public setting with input from all the community. So we're on the path, and it's going to be a long path ahead.
Thank you. Ms. Labriola.
I just wanted to say, as a parent of a child who has experienced discrimination on special education, I definitely feel there's a frustration level here, especially from the special education students, for not being recognized. I personally have agendas dating back to 2012 with Dr. Alvarez and the board at that time, mentioning that we need to do something about inclusion and discrimination in our schools. So while it's been a long, Mr. Repetto said, it's a long time coming. Yeah, it's been a long time coming. I'm going on almost 10 years of hounding the school district that there needs to be better inclusion in our schools. So while I look at the task force and I look at the race and inclusion, and that I believe was as a result of an Instagram page that resulted in student stories about racism, there was an equal Instagram account that has risen up anonymously about discrimination against students with disabilities. And so far, the district has not addressed that, although I do know that we spoke about this at last night's board meeting, that they do intend to address that. But
Thank you, Ms. Labriola. It looks like Mr. Repetto has a rebuttal.
Yeah.
Can we finish the round though?
Oh, sure.
Allison, we finished the round?
We finished the round first.
Yeah.
That is
Ms.
the end
Johnson
of
has
the
to go.
round. That is the
Finish the
end
round.
of the
That
round.
was the end.
Yeah.
Kelsey,
So
I'm not
Kelsey.
sure if I got a chance, Miss Tenney, to speak on this topic. Kelsey Johnson.
Go ahead,
I
Kelsey.
apologize.
Nope.
Didn't, it's your turn.
Again.
Okay. So as I've already said, I am a parent in the Rye City School District, and I'm also a volunteer on the Race, Inclusivity, and Community Task Force, which I was compelled to apply for last summer after reading the open letter from alumni to our community, which was followed by an Instagram account that detailed over 250 instances of exclusion in our community. And unfortunately, as Laura said, these documented stories continued with new Instagram feeds against special needs children. We as a community know we can do better, and we seem to have consensus on that. I've been meeting at least monthly with the 60+ volunteer members on this task force, who I met for the first time at our kickoff meeting last August. The work is complex, made more so by the current national landscape, which does rouse emotional responses to our task at hand. But I'm excited for the community to hear our well-considered ideas as we gather information to define the problem in Rye. Our community cares deeply about this topic, and they have a range of perspectives, and we're going to continue to work together to improve and become more inclusive for all of our students.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, and my sincere apologies for somehow skipping over you. Was there any rebuttal, Mr. Repetto?
There was. I just wanted to make the point, and Kelsey actually, nailed it pretty well at the beginning, that what happened was we got a letter from 10 of our recent graduates. These are people we know, kids I knew personally that a lot of people did, who stepped up very courageously and told us that the experience they had was quite explicitly not what we thought it was. So the beginning of the reaction was to our students who reached out to us for help. That's where the focus needs to remain. And it was the key to this. So it's what got all this kicked off. So I just want to change the record on that. It wasn't an anonymous Instagram account that started all this. Awful things to hear, but there was a lot more that started this.
Thank you very much. And I see Mr. Jovanovic, and then looks like Ms. Labriola, but Ms.
So I just want to
Jovanovic.
correct one thing. It seems that we're kind of talking past each other. Nobody, and people know I am the one who organized the resistance to the critical race theory in the city. So there's not a secret about that. Nobody is actually questioning the need for this. Nobody is questioning that this happened and and none of us has ever done it. However, I strongly object to the presence of Steinfeld Center because they present in every word they have a very radical ideology that denies the existence of the United States. Sorry, that's not.
Thank you very much. Ms. Labriola?
Yeah, and just to follow on, I think that the level of frustration from the special ed parents stems from the fact that we have been knocking on the Board of Ed's door since long ago, since 2012. I stood in front of the Board of Ed years ago when Dr. Alvarez was our superintendent, and I was able to get the board to agree to form a superintendent special ed advisory committee. I sat on that committee, and it seems just to be, because of maybe change in administration, there has been a lot of turnover. We can put it to that, but there's just been a lack of follow through on the district's part of inclusion for special ed.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I just did want to say something. I do want to caution the board and members that, having anonymous sites, I understand that some of these letters came to people individually, but that if it comes down to a disciplinary issue where it's a teacher involved, the teacher has a right to due process. And when it goes into a public court like that, there could be serious legal repercussions, even if you need to terminate that teacher. That might become a serious problem where you can't, because you violated their due process rights. There are procedures. I know this from the city. I was a LEOC with the Equal Opportunity Board.
Thank you, Mr. Muschietti.
Yeah, so I seen this firsthand, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, looks like we can move ahead to question number 5 on communication. I've counted all the candidates that I've written down here, so I don't think I'm going to miss anybody. But we'll start with Ms. Evans, please. The question is, sorry, well, I've almost forgot the question. What steps would you take to improve communication between the Rye community, the Board of Education, and the Superintendent of Schools?
Sorry, I thought I was on another planet and missed the question. So sorry about that. I think the communication from Dr. Byrne has been really consistent, and I've appreciated getting those weekly emails. And certainly the PTO in Rye at my school has been incredible. I personally would like to see more communication from the teachers directly to the families. But that being said, I completely understand that, we're here to provide support and oversight and not micromanage what's happening in the classroom. But I've been really pleased with the communication so far. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Mr. Muschietti.
Well, I definitely agree. I get letters from the superintendent all the time. I will confess, I copied and pasted the teacher appreciation letter, took out a few words, and I used it for my school. So thank you, Mr. Burns. I do have to say that communication's been great. I would like to see more communication from teachers, especially when students are falling off. So that is something I really want to see. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Yovanovich.
Yeah, I have to agree with one part, which is the communication from the school and superintendent has been adequate or regarding all the events that are happening. Not surprising, I'm not very happy with the interaction with the board. As the current members know, I've been asking multiple questions, and not only me, other people, and they have not been answered. Also sent letters and messages with well-documented issues, which have also not been answered. So one of the themes that are part of my campaign is that the transparency is paramount, not once, not twice, not when somebody feels like it, but at all times. And I know sometimes it can get overwhelming because, especially when hot topics come like now, but that is the part of an open government. And that's where the members of the board are represented. You have to be open and transparent. That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Leonard.
Thanks. The real communication issue I would like to raise is communication with the broader community of Rye. I received no communication at all that there would be volunteers accepted for a task force. And in any event, by the time it would have come into me, the ranks had been filled with those that were on the closer communication channel. The second area, the tracking of financial and operating trends over the years is inadequate. I got a lot of help from Gaby to get back budget reports to try and track the head count, the number of students, budgets, and tax caps over the years. It's not readily available on board docs. I would frankly love to sit down and design a 5-year financial report of the type I get routinely from a corporation. And I think we can do a lot better communicating to the community as a whole who is paying the bills for this operation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Erickson.
I think communication can always be summer retreat every year when we talk about our goals. One of the goals is improved communication. So it's something that I think that you're always looking for ways to improve and reach the community. I think that, as others have said, that I've noticed an improvement in the communication over the past 5 years. I appreciate Dr. Burns' weekly community newsletter that I receive. The website's been revamped and it's more accessible and easy to use. And another thing that's come up from COVID is that the meeting participation with Google Meet and Zoom, I think it's allowed a lot more participants. As Chris can attest, in the past, we used to get maybe 1 or 2 people in the audience for most board meetings. And now we get, much larger turnout because people can watch from their homes. So I think that that's been, one of the silver linings in COVID over the past year. It's just more community, communication.
Thank you. Ms. Labriola.
Yes, definitely to follow on with what Callie said, I was going to say one of the upsides of COVID has been using the Google Meets and Zoom communications, and I've definitely been able to participate in more Board of Ed meetings that way. So I would love to see that continued so more of our community can be involved. Another thing, as an old school mom, I have to give kudos to, I think it was either Caitlin Sassone or Sarah Derman. I mean, we have pay schools, pay PAMs. There's so many different technology methodologies that we use here for all of our school lunch and report cards, and having it all in one place and nice cohesive on our website. I think that's been such a positive change. And one more thing I'd like to add, as somebody who is a parent who's in the know and what's going on behind the scenes in special education, I do feel sometimes that there's a lot of really positive things that are going on that don't necessarily get communicated out. So anyway, if that could be one piece of constructive criticism, that's what I would suggest.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson.
Thank you. I absolutely echo the sentiments a lot of the candidates have relayed about Dr. Byrne and the administration and their excellent communication throughout really Dr. Burns' tenure, but this past year, it's been a resource for me to understand as the changes have been often, and we've all had to be flexible. So that's been very helpful. As I mentioned, I am the co-chair of the Traffic and Pedestrian Safety Committee, where I do interface with residents. It's not at the school board level, but I appreciate that, the volume of requests and information incoming to us, it is very difficult to particularly parse out a response to every individual person. So we often do send out sort of generalized information, grouping together answers, in similar buckets. We try our best, and that's what I see the school board doing. Typically on issues like the Race, Inclusivity, and Community Task Force, they've dedicated a whole page on their website and a drop down with all the communications from the administration, from the board. So I appreciate the transparency there.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Repetto.
Kelsey, thanks for that endorsement. I agree. That's good stuff. Yeah, I shout out to our administration for really, ramping up their game this year around communication. We knew it was critical, and we asked Dr. Byrne to pick it up, and he was already ahead of us. So as he is on so many topics, communication is huge. We talk about it every year. As Callie said, it's part of our summer retreat. It's a big focus of what we do. It's always a challenge. I'd say this: we hold an open community forum almost every 2 weeks. In time past, tough year this year. It was a little hard start, but we got better on the social platforms to do this. It is in some ways better. But our doors are open. We ask the community to show up on Tuesday nights and talk to us and tell us what they think. We listen. We don't respond to everything. It's not always a Q&A session, but we do listen to everything, and we absolutely welcome everyone to come up and talk to us. Our emails, the board email, our personal emails, Dr. Burns' email, the administration. Reach out. We're here to communicate.
Thank you. Thank you.
Alice, if it's okay, I say we do the last question.
Yeah, I think we're moving along.
I think there'd be a rebuttal from.
Rebuttal.
Oh, yeah, after the rebuttals, yeah.
Yep,
So,
go ahead, Mr. Jovanovic.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I understand that every session cannot be a Q&A, but you also receive communications afterwards, which is not answered. So fine, it may take a week, it may take a few days, but you need to answer those questions. And my point was that they don't get answered repeatedly. And it's not just me, there is a lot of people who don't get an answer. So that's where it needs to be worked out. If multiple people besides the board chair, president should answer, that's a different thing. We should work on that, but you have to answer eventually.
Thank you, Mr. Jovanovic. I think we're okay to move ahead. Okay, so our last question before we get to closing statements: is there another topic you'd like to address that we haven't covered tonight? And we will start with Mr. Muschetti.
Yes, I would like to discuss the U.S. News and World Report, our ranking as a school. I see that we're 167, and I'd like to see Rye work on that ranking. It's a great ranking, don't get me wrong, but I looked at some data sets, and like with Bronxville, and Rye is beating Bronxville hands down in a whole slew of areas on standardized exams by 1,000 on standardized exams, and yet we're losing in the rankings because of denominators and simple math that can be fixed. So it's something I'd really like to bring up to the board members and perhaps the superintendent and see if we can get that ironed out.
Thank you. Mr. Jovanovic.
So my focus, of course, is education excellence. And in that regard, I have actually brought to the attention of some people that some of these critical race theory things are already creeping into the curriculum. And I submitted to the board a copy of the curriculum in a kindergarten in Osborne that happened a couple of weeks back. So what I'd like to see is that strict guidelines we put in place, that teachers don't have the freedom to put in their ideology into the classroom. We're here for education, not indoctrination. And to that end, there could be different ways of handling it, but it should not be a place where the school or anybody imposes things against parental will. There are a massive amount of legal precedents that show that parents have the responsibility for the upbringing of children, and the school is a help to that. That's a fact. That's actually a legal set of legal cases that follows that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Leonard.
I think the other issue I'd like to raise is, and I think this is shared by one or two of the rest of you, is what can we do to get these students out of a parade of SUVs and walking or bicycling to school, particularly those that live within a mile of the school. And that was walking distance when I grew up in the Stone Age. I suspect it should be, but that would be the issue I'd like to raise.
Thank you. Ms. Erickson.
I think I would highlight, the question would be, what are you most proud of over the past 3 years? And I just want to say how proud I am of the district's response to COVID. No one anticipated COVID happening a year ago. And last spring, was not ideal when everyone had to go to remote learning, but the district really learned a lot from our mistakes and the feedback it received from parents. And then over the summer, worked with the technology department and professional development with the teachers and came up with a robust learning plan, hybrid learning plan for the fall. And it was, and then also all the mitigation preventive measures that went into place with the plexiglass and the mask and the surveillance testing. And the culmination of all this was us being the first district in Westchester to reopen full-time this spring in March. So I'm very proud of that accomplishment.
Thank you. Ms. Labriola.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to talk a little bit about curriculum and going back to the basics. I know hopefully if we all get back to learning in person, one of the things I think that we really need to look at is having scaffolded curriculum for all. And I believe that that would help all levels of learners, looking at having different scaffolded programs and some simple things that could help put the infrastructure in place that all levels of learners need. I do know from being involved with RAISE that we have changed gears on our reading and mathematics programs a few times during the tenure of my children's being at the district. So I just think we need to look at something like that a little more carefully and be consistent.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Johnson.
Thank you. I have to echo Mr. Leonard's focus on walkability. It is something that is very important to me. I have chaired the Walk to School Week at Midland. I joined the Traffic and Pedestrian Safety Committee in the city and was moved up to co-chair because of my work on that committee. It is something that I'm very actively involved in, and I think it is so important. When we improve walkability for our students, we increase their exercise, their neighborhood connectivity, we decrease exhaust fumes and road rage in our town. It is so positive. I even worked for 6 years with a group of residents to help figure out how we could get a sidewalk on Forest Avenue. If anyone's familiar with the stretch between Menursing and Appowamus, where there are multiple feeder roads, I counted in the directories, there's close to 200 school children that are boxed in by that area. They live a half a mile to 3/4 of a mile from the high school, middle school in Midland, and yet they cannot safely access it. So I'm proud of that accomplishment, and I definitely will work on that if I get a seat on the board.
Thank you. Mr. Repetto.
First, Kelsey, thank you for that work on Appowamus. That is tremendous. Keep it going. We got to get that done. That's huge. Such a great thing. Hey, listen, we've talked a little bit about how Rye we try to be out ahead of the curve. We're ahead of other districts, and we're always forward thinking. We need to think about what we learned from the pandemic. We've learned so much about how students learn, how they develop, socially, emotionally, academically. We've learned tons about new methods of content delivery and interaction and engagement. We need to take the good. We need to take the best out of that and learn how to put it into a better future. It doesn't have to be all bad. There are some challenges to overcome, but we can learn a lot out of this. Just look at the technology improvements we've already had, and there's a lot to springboard out of this. So let's look forward.
Thank you. Ms. Evans.
This is where going last isn't great because you've all said a lot of really good ideas. I didn't know I was passionate about walkability, but I am. Also, just echoing what Chris said, I think there's a lot of good that teachers have learned from, becoming more tech friendly. I know I could speak for my own school. That's been the case at my own school. So just really looking inward on how we can keep the good going from what we've learned. But yeah, I think we're all set. We've said it all.
Great. All right, we will now move to closing statements. You'll be given 90 seconds for each of these, and we will start with Mr. Jovanovic.
All right, so I'm looking to ensure that Rye schools keep their excellence and serve all of our students, all, by providing equal opportunity to all. To that end, I think the best way forward is to make sure that we all see each other's intrinsic humanity and ensure that we celebrate the great promise of the United States, that all men are created equal and that are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, such as life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. To that end, I vow that we will not permit the destructive, divisive ideology of critical race theory, its antecedents, which is Marxism and postmodernist philosophy, and its metastases, such as culturally responsive sustaining learning and Project 1690 to enter our schools, no matter what. To that end, I would also like to establish a library of courses, either in the Rye Free Reading Room or at our schools, where every course offered in Rye Middle School and Rye High School would have its lesson plans and all of the reading material deposited at the beginning of the school year, or at least 30 days before it's taught. It is to be understood, and for the lower grades, all the reading materials as well. It is to be understood that parents have the right to expect every single thing that's being presented in school and to exempt their children from the objectionable material. School retiration is not permitted. I also understand there are parents who are champions of CRT and similar ideas. If you wish your child to be instructed in such manner, be my guest, but not with my child, not with the public money, not in my public schools, and against my wishes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Muschetti.
Unmute. So I have my daughter's currently in Rye School. I have a son who's a proud graduate. I'm a firm believer in that students must come first and be placed first. I'm requesting your vote for on May 18th for the board. I have 28 years experience in schools. Of that, as a dean of students, social studies teacher, and at least 15 years as administrator. I've worked in every aspect of high schools. I really would be an asset to the board. I know a lot of regulations and rules that govern these situations that we're currently find ourselves in. And I think I'd be a great help to everyone here. So I appreciate everyone for volunteering and working for Rye. Thank you.
Thank you from the contribution from the dog in the background. Next, we move to Ms. Evans.
Thank you. I wanted to thank all of you for your time and for the very thoughtful questions. It was also great to see so many people online who are so invested in our schools. As I've said, if you choose to elect me, I'm someone who's going to listen, reflect, and be thoughtful and intentional in this work. I'd like to reiterate that I believe it is so important that board members understand what all of our stakeholders think and feel, but also that they remember that everything the board does should be for the education and well-being of our students. We must always put them first. With 2 young children, the success of Rye schools is deeply personal to me, and I believe my extensive background in education will serve the board as well as the community. More than anything, I hope to help maintain an environment of rigorous academic achievement while fostering a school community that is equitable and welcoming to all students. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Repetto.
Sure, make it really quick. Focus on our students, focus on our community, focus on our family. Keep it there. I'm going to make some closing comments about ideology. We hear it all the time. The role of the school board is to be non-ideological. We hear a lot about radical ideology. It's also important to make sure that we avoid reactionary ideology. It's our job to be the arbiters and do what's best for our students. And it happens. I'll give you an example. Go back to our open topics night a year and a half ago. We had parents show up with a list of books they want banned in the middle school from our open reading lists. Did that parent see themselves as a reactionary ideologue? No. They thought they were doing what's best. It's our job on the board to make sure that we balance what everyone says and that we don't bring ideologies and that we focus on our students at Rye, creating and sticking to the commitment of what we commit to the students. We have it on a big poster behind us. We talk about it every year. Focus on the students, focus on Rye, focus on our community, focus on our family. Thanks for everybody for participating. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson.
Thank you. Our school district reached a turning point in 2017 with the hire of our extraordinary superintendent, Dr. Eric Byrne. He has earned my respect through his thoughtful leadership, his proven commitment, and his vision to propel our school district into continued excellence. This year, I was incredibly inspired by the tireless commitment of his administration and our school board as they managed our community through the COVID crisis. To be honest, last spring and early summer, my focus was my own family, just getting through each day. And while I turned inward, our administration and board spread out. And for that, they made all the difference to my family, and I'm eternally grateful. This respect and gratitude compelled me to step in and do my part to continue this journey. I've always hoped to serve on the school board, and I'm motivated in this moment to come in ready, willing, and energized. To cultivate excellence, we must always strive to do better. If elected, I'm going to work to improve processes as I did on the Traffic and Pedestrian Safety Committee. There, I coordinated with the Rye City Police Department to gather, standardize, and analyze over 10 years of motor vehicle accident data. I believe data improves decision-making, and in TPS, we now rely on this accident data to help us prioritize our residents' requests, the many that come into us. I'm going to use my solutions-oriented experience to collaborate with the community, to prioritize our processes, and to advocate for the success of every single student. Thank you for taking the time, and please vote on May 18th.
Thank you. Ms. Labriola.
Thank you again to the League of Women Voters, and thank you for the opportunity to run for the board. I hope tonight I've been able to give you some insight into my diverse background and the resources I can bring to the table that are relevant and facing our district today, like the capital projects, COVID recovery, mental health awareness, and the Race and Inclusion Task Force. If you have not had a chance, please read my bio on the district website or my Rye interview, which will give you a little more information about what I can offer. I do have 20 years of construction management experience, budgeting, cost control, union negotiations. And in my past, I've worked as a contractor for the New York City School Construction Authority and local municipalities. So I do understand the complexities and scope of many of the projects in the district's future. I've also been to active shooter and stop the bleed training. As of tonight, there have been 148 active shootings in the school so far. And the next phase of our capital projects is adding secure vestibule entrances to all 5 school buildings. So that's just another resource I can bring to the community when working on these upcoming projects. And lastly, I wanted to mention that I served on the Special Education Task Force in 2018. And while special education and inclusion have become buzzwords of late, for me, they're not buzzwords. It's something that I live every day, and I will bring this compassion with me to a seat on the board. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to provide my information. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. Ms. Erickson.
Thank you again to the League of Women Voters for hosting this event, and to all the candidates and community members for their participation. I'm grateful for this opportunity to present my qualifications and viewpoints and explain why I believe I should be reelected for another term on the board. As we know, Many people, myself included, moved to Rye because of the quality of our schools. Therefore, I believe it's imperative that we maintain and foster a learning environment that provides rigorous standards and high academic achievement goals for our students. At the same time, we have to thoughtfully examine and come up with solutions to many complex and challenging issues we currently face, such as filling COVID learning gaps, addressing the social and emotional well-being of our students, and providing an inclusive environment for all our learners. In addition, over the next few years, we have to effectively manage the capital bond project to ensure it is carried out in a fiscally responsible and timely manner. Community service, giving back, and our children's education are all passions of mine. For the past 3 years, I have thoroughly enjoyed my time on the board. I have done my best to advocate for all children, to work in partnership with parents, the administration, and the community, and to listen to all perspectives. Tonight, I am asking for your vote to allow me to serve another term so I can help support the district in the critical and challenging time ahead. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. Mr. Leonard. You're on mute, Mr. Leonard.
Muted, John.
You're on mute.
Sorry, everyone. Wanted to, first of all, thank everyone for their attention and interest tonight. And I think we're all looking forward to your participation at the polls on the 18th, whether you vote in person or via the absentee ballot. I'm running for two reasons. One is that the schools serve the entire Rye community. That does not mean the entire Rye school community. The lack of transparency for the broader public, the lack of communication to the broader public, and the lack of regard for the feelings of the broader public have been all too apparent in the past few years. Historically, Rye schools would have an 80% consensus on whatever they did. They did not on the capital bond. They certainly do not on the RIT study. And as far as the question of, so disclosure, transparency, and the way the city does, getting genuine public input before big decisions are made or even considered is absolutely key. I intend to work hard for this. I think several of my co-runners also would be useful independent voices on the board. I am very disturbed that we have unanimous decisions from the board on issues that are not of unanimous consent thing, and that issues like hiring the Metro Center are done by unanimous consent when they should be advertised to the public before any decision is made. We might as well have hired the Ku Klux Klan to run the study.
Thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Leonard. Thank you. So we have come to the end of a very informative debate, or I should say forum. I'd like to thank all of the candidates. I'd like to remind the voters that Election Day is Tuesday, May 18th, with polls open, or the poll open from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. And I say the poll because there's only one polling site this year at Rye Middle School Gymnasium at 3 Parsons Street. I'd also like to thank our timekeeper, Roz Carbon, who did an outstanding job. And thank you to Doug French from the League of Women Voters. And thank you to all of you who have been patient with me with my mishaps. I'll be better prepared for the next time I moderate. And to all, a very good night.
Thanks, everybody, for showing up.
Thank you,
everybody.
Thank you.